cop laughs at black woman in court. Until she reveals she's a federal judge. Dark clouds hovered over the city skyline as tensions simmered beneath the surface. A heated case awaited its turn in the silent corridors of justice, where reputations could be forged or shattered with a single misstep. One unsuspecting officer, brimming with misplaced confidence, was about to step into a reckoning like no other. In a room charged with unspoken bias and silent assumptions, a poised black woman stood seemingly powerless. Little did the officer know a startling revelation would ignite a storm of karma. This is the story of how laughter in a courtroom can summon unimaginable consequences. Prepare yourself. It was a crisp Monday morning in Manhattan, and the Thurgood Marshall United States Courthouse buzzed with quiet tension. Lawyers shuffled in and out of the marble-floored lobby, arms laden with briefcases and towering stacks of documents. Security guards offered cordial nods to familiar faces. Civilian visitors gawked at the immense pillars and the intricately designed ceiling. The building stood as a fortress of justice named for a legendary figure in American jurisprudence, a constant reminder of the hard-won battles against prejudice. Down one of the long corridors, a petite yet commanding black woman named Simone Holliday strode with an air of serenity. She wore a simple navy blue pencil skirt, a crisp white blouse, and carried herself with a certain understated grace. People glanced at her in passing, some with curiosity, others with polite acknowledgement. Yet no one seemed to realize the gravity of her presence. In this courthouse, looks could be dangerously deceiving. Outside courtroom 14C, Simone paused for a moment to survey the hallway. She was on a schedule, but not in a frantic hurry. Years of discipline had taught her that justice never bowed to haste. Her thoughts drifted as she contemplated the significance of this day. She was there to oversee a routine hearing, a part of the daily grind in her line of work. However, something about the energy in the air felt off, like a storm was brewing just beyond the horizon. At the far end of the hallway, a uniformed police officer named Officer Gavin Locke stood leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. Tall, broad-shouldered, and exuding confidence, he struck up conversations with fellow officers and passers-by. He seemed to enjoy being the center of attention. Locke's face broke into an easy grin whenever he recounted dramatic tales of arrests and heroic interventions. He didn't notice Simone at first. To him, she was just another woman in a sea of suits. Moments later, Simone approached the door to 14C, but found herself briefly stopped by a courthouse deputy, standard security. She flashed a quick, polite smile and handed over a small official pass. The deputy nodded respectfully. Satisfied, Simone walked inside, her posture calm, her heels tapping neatly on the polished floor. Inside, the murmurs of attorneys conferring with their clients filled the air. The clang of the bench and the rustle of robes usually heralded a judge's entrance, but Simone was not in her robe. Not yet. For now, she was simply an observer, gauging the atmosphere for a moment. As Simone surveyed the space, she noticed Officer Locke swagger in behind her. His posture self-assured, his eyes scanning the gallery. He clearly relished the environment. Courtrooms represented a stage to him, a place where he could stand in uniform and feel important. His gaze flicked to Simone, but he paid her little heed. They were all there for the same preliminary matter, a hearing related to an alleged wrongful arrest. A young black man named Anthony Gaines had been taken into custody under suspicion of theft. The arrest report filed by Locke claimed that Anthony had been seen fleeing a designer clothing store with stolen merchandise. However, Anthony insisted he had never set foot in that store, The store's security footage was inconclusive. The hearing was to determine whether there was sufficient probable cause for the arrest, or if the case should be dismissed before trial. Simone found a seat in the front row, crossing her legs as she perched quietly. She listened to the exchange of hushed whispers between Anthony and his public defender, a visibly overworked woman, flipping anxiously through a manila folder of notes. Officer Locke, meanwhile, was swapping small talk with the assistant district attorney. He spoke loudly enough that even Simone, seated several chairs away, could overhear him. "Yeah." The kid was acting suspicious. "I knew the moment I saw him, something was off." "Always trust your gut, right?" The assistant district attorney nodded, though she looked less than enthusiastic. Simone couldn't help but notice the officer's air of confidence. There was something about his smug grin that suggested he believed the entire hearing was a mere formality. Suddenly the door to the judge's chambers opened. The bailiff stepped out, clearing his throat. "All rise," he called out, his voice echoing in the space. Simone stood along with the others, heart pounding. She knew the next few moments would set the tone for a turn of events that would echo far beyond this single case. Yet to the surprise of everyone, perhaps especially Officer Locke, the person who emerged from chambers wasn't Judge Meredith Arlen, the magistrate who normally presided over preliminary hearings. Instead, a different clerk appeared and informed the room Judge Arlen is delayed. A substitute judge is on her way. Please remain standing. There was confusion among the attendees, a stirring of whispers. Simone remained completely still, an imperceptible smile tugging at her lips. She knew precisely who was about to walk in. But just then, a subtle beep sounded on Simone's phone. She checked it discreetly, a message from the head clerk confirming that the stand-in judge for Arlen had an urgent matter and wouldn't make it. The clerk asked Simone to fill in immediately, reminding her that her duty was essential. Simone felt a faint flutter of adrenaline. She hadn't originally planned to preside over the hearing herself, but destiny, it seemed, was rearranging the puzzle pieces. Calmly, Simone tucked her phone away and moved toward the side entrance of the courtroom, where the judge usually entered. Nobody followed her. People assumed she was stepping out for a private reason. Officer Locke, noticing her departure, raised an eyebrow. He stifled a chuckle. "Looks like somebody can't wait for the session to start," he muttered under his breath, just as he said that the large wooden door behind the bench swung open. The bailiff repeated, "All rise. Court is now in session." Officer Locke turned to face the bench, expecting to see someone older, austere, perhaps a venerable figure with silver hair and the famous black robe. Instead, to his utter astonishment, Simone Holliday strode confidently into the courtroom, this time wearing her robe of office. She took her seat behind the bench, placed her gavel gently on the polished wood, and surveyed the room with calm authority. A hush fell over the crowd. Many recognized her face now. After all, she had garnered local recognition as the youngest appointed federal judge in the district. But for others especially, Officer Locke. This was the shock of a lifetime. Still in that moment of stunned silence, Locke let out a short, involuntary chuckle. The disbelief was so strong that he almost refused to process it. A black woman, one he had casually dismissed just moments before, was now presiding over his case. The notion seemed impossible to him. Simone's eyes flicked to the officer, her expression unreadable. Karma, as it turned out, was about to set the stage. Simone settled into the judge's chair with a composed air. Though her face remained neutral inside, she felt the shifting tension in the room, like static electricity. The clerk introduced her formally. The Honorable Simone Holliday, presiding. For Officer Gavin Locke, the words hung in the air with an almost mocking resonance. He tried to mask his surprise, but a faint smirk still hovered around his lips. Behind that smirk, though, his mind was racing. He remembered seeing Simone in the hallway, assumed she was just another observer, perhaps a paralegal or a family member of a defendant. Certainly not a federal judge. Locked in the collective gaze of the courtroom, Simone wasted no time. "Good morning," she began, her voice measured. "We're here for a probable cause hearing involving Mr. Anthony Gaines. Are counsel ready to proceed?" The attorneys nodded, and the public defender, Ms. Rita Flores, stepped forward first. She spoke in a halting, tired tone, reciting the details of Anthony's case: an alleged theft at a designer clothing store, contradictory witness statements, no direct evidence. Officer Locke had written in his report that he saw Anthony sprinting from the scene, but there was no security footage capturing Anthony clearly inside the establishment. "Your Honor," Rita continued, "we have reason to believe my client was profiled and wrongfully detained. We ask that this case be dismissed due to lack of substantial evidence." Simone turned to the prosecution. The assistant district attorney, a woman named Kelly Carter, straightened her blazer and responded, "Your Honor." Officer Locke maintains he observed suspicious behavior consistent with theft. The store manager gave a statement indicating a man matching the defendant's description fled when confronted. While we acknowledge some ambiguity in the footage, we believe further investigation is warranted. Throughout this exchange, Officer Locke stood at attention. His posture was rigid, but his expression was transparent. He was itching to speak, to explain how his instincts never failed him. Yet he couldn't quite shake the uneasy feeling that the judge, the same woman he'd casually dismissed in the hallway, might view his testimony with a critical eye. Simone studied him for a moment. There was something about Locke's manner that triggered alarm bells. She'd encountered many officers in her career, some exemplars of integrity, some less so. This one, she sensed, basked in authority, and seldom questioned his own judgments. She also noticed the subtle arrogance in his stance and the condescending way he glared at Anthony Gaines. Officer Locke Simone called in a calm, even tone, "Please step forward and be sworn in." He did as instructed, raising his right hand. The oath was administered, and he took the stand. Simone allowed a moment of silence for him to adjust the microphone. Then, with a polite nod, she said, "Tell the court, in your own words, exactly what happened on the day you detained Mr. Gaines." Locke cleared his throat. "I was on routine patrol near 57th and Lexington. I got a call about a suspected shoplifter who had taken items from a high-end boutique. The description said a young African-American male wearing a gray hoodie and dark jeans had fled the store with stolen merchandise. I arrived on scene and spotted Mr. Gaines running across the street. He matched the description, so I pursued and stopped him." Simone noticed how many times Locke emphasized the suspect's race in those few sentences. Of course, race is part of a description, but the way Locke delivered it felt more charged than necessary. "Were there any other details in the call that led you to believe Mr. Gaines was the suspect?" Simone asked. Locke shrugged. "It was a chaotic scene, Your Honor. People were yelling that the thief had run out. I saw a gray hoodie, saw him running, and put two and two together. Did you personally witness Mr. Gaines leaving the boutique nom? But the store manager identified him." Simone steepled her fingers. "Officer, the store manager's written statement indicates a person in a gray hoodie left quickly, but it does not confirm Mr. Gaines's identity with absolute certainty. There's no conclusive footage. So your arrest was based purely on matching clothing and what you perceived as suspicious behavior." Locke's gaze flicked around the room. He frowned slightly. That's correct, Your Honor. Look, I know a criminal when I see one. No offense intended, but sometimes you just have to go with your gut. An almost audible gasp stirred in the gallery. Simone maintained her composure, but she felt a surge of indignation. Gut instinct was a slippery slope in law enforcement. Gut instincts had led to countless wrongful arrests and tragedies, especially for people of color. Simone turned to the public defender. Miss Flores, do you have any questions for Officer Locke? Rita Flores approached the witness stand. Officer, you stated you arrived at the store after receiving a call. Did you look at the store's security footage before detaining Mr. Gaines? No, Locke responded curtly. Did you speak to any witnesses who saw the actual theft occur? Locke hesitated, choosing his words with caution. I spoke to the store manager, Ms. Whitfield, but she was busy. She pointed out that a man in a grey hoodie took something and ran. Rita pressed. So you did not see him commit a crime? You saw someone running in a grey hoodie and concluded he was the thief. Locke grew defensive. I made a judgment call based on the situation. That's part of police work. A hush settled over the courtroom once more. Rita took a step back, concluding, no further questions. Simone nodded. Officer Locke, you may step down for the moment, but please remain available for further questioning. He exited the stand, his expression a mixture of mild annoyance and lingering arrogance. He still carried himself as though convinced the case was open and shut. Simone looked over at Anthony Gaines. He was in his early 20s, slender, wearing second-hand clothes and scuffed sneakers that told a story of limited means. His eyes were heavy with worry, but there was also a glint of righteous anger. Turning to Ms. Flores, Simone inquired whether Anthony wished to take the stand. Rita glanced at her client, who gave a small nod. They were aware that testifying could be a risk, but Anthony felt he had nothing to hide. Anthony approached the witness stand cautiously. After he was sworn in, Simone invited him to speak. Mr. Gaines, she began. Tell us what happened from your perspective. He shifted in his seat. I was on my way to meet a friend at a coffee shop a block away. I run track at my community college, so I jog a lot. I was literally jogging when Officer Locke tackled me to the ground. I had no idea he was after me, until it was too late. The room was silent as Anthony recounted the humiliating arrest. He explained he had no stolen merchandise, that no store staff had confronted him, and that he only realized later he'd been mistaken for someone else. And the clothing you wore that day? The grey hoodie, Simone probed. Anthony nodded. Yes, but it's a plain grey hoodie. I've had it for years. It's my usual running attire. Officer Locke, listening from his seat, snorted quietly. His disbelief in the story was evident. Simone saw it, and in that moment, something deep within her churned memories of her own encounters with dismissive authority figures who believed they knew who she was simply by glancing at her. When Anthony finished, Miss Flores sat down, looking somewhat relieved that her client had been able to give his side of the story. Simone called the attorneys up for a sidebar to discuss next steps. The prosecution wanted more time to gather evidence. The defense insisted the arrest was baseless and demanded immediate dismissal. Simone weighed the arguments carefully. She knew the legal standard for a probable cause hearing wasn't the same as a full trial's burden of proof. But the glaring gaps in this case raised significant concerns. All right, she finally said, returning to the bench. Given the ambiguities, I will allow this matter to proceed to a limited discovery phase. However, I want the prosecution to provide additional evidence, specifically conclusive security footage or eyewitness accounts within 14 days. If you fail to do so, The case will be dismissed. Am I clear? The attorneys agreed, though. Ms. Carter seemed less than thrilled. The entire proceeding left an uncomfortable ripple in the room. Officer Locke, in particular, clenched his jaw. He might not be able to pin the crime on Anthony if the evidence didn't materialize. As the hearing wrapped up, Simone rose and gave a final firm rap of her gavel. Court is adjourned. Everyone filed out slowly. Some shot curious glances at Simone, others whispered among themselves, but Officer Locke simply glared at her. He seemed affronted both by her authoritative role and her skeptical handling of his testimony. Simone stepped down from the bench. She would have been content to walk away, but something stopped her. She found herself crossing paths with Locke near the courthouse exit. He was muttering to another officer, occasionally casting glances her way. She caught a snatch of his words. Unbelievable. She's got to make it a race thing. Just watch. She wants to coddle criminals. Something inside Simone hardened like steel. She approached him calmly. Officer Locke, a word, please. He turned, clearly not expecting a direct confrontation. Yes, Your Honor. Simone's tone was cool, poised. In my courtroom, every person's rights are protected equally. If you have concerns about how I conduct hearings, you're free to file a motion for recusal or address it through the appropriate channels. Locke forced a tight smile. I respect the court, Your Honor. I was just saying. She held up a hand. I don't need explanations. I need respect for the process. Good day, officer. With that, Simone walked off, leaving Locke stewing in a mixture of humiliation and anger. He couldn't comprehend how quickly the power dynamic had flipped. His laughter from earlier had died on his lips. Little did they both know, this was only the beginning of a spiraling chain of events. The seeds of conflict had been sown, and soon enough hidden truths, old grudges, and systemic biases would crash together in a dramatic showdown that would test Simone's resolve and Locke's very career. Days passed, and Simone resumed her usual docket of cases. She handled everything from federal contract disputes to complex civil rights litigation, but the memory of that hearing lingered. She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that Officer Locke's story was riddled with holes, nor could she shake the sense that Anthony Gaines's ordeal was far from over. Over in a different corner of Manhattan, Gavin Locke wasn't faring much better. Rumors had circulated in the precinct about the judge, who seemed too sympathetic to a suspect. He found himself the subject of jokes among some colleagues, while others urged him to be more cautious. Listen, Gavin, said his partner, Officer Felicia Rodriguez, while they sat in their squad car. You're a good cop, but you can't rely on gut instincts alone. That's how mistakes happen. Locke scoffed. I've been doing this job for years. People are just too sensitive these days. Rodriguez lowered her voice. You know that's not what this is about. This kid might actually be innocent. Locke stared out the windshield, tapping the steering wheel in annoyance. Deep down, part of him bristled at the idea he could be wrong. He'd built an identity on being a no-nonsense officer who cleaned up the streets. If he admitted error, his pride would take a heavy hit, especially after that scene in court. As the days rolled on, his tension escalated. He started obsessing over the case. He told himself it was because he believed Anthony was guilty, and he wanted justice to be served. But in truth, the creeping worry that he might have profiled an innocent man gnawed at him. The memory of Judge Holliday's poised face only exacerbated his turmoil. One afternoon, fate decided to entwine their lives again. Simone had just finished a series of meetings with local community groups about a youth mentorship program. She was pushing for more collaboration between the court and police to foster trust. Leaving the meeting, she emerged onto a busy street in Harlem. The sun had begun to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. She walked briskly, a stack of folders in hand, her mind replaying the day's events. Suddenly she heard raised voices. Turning a corner, she spotted a young teenager pinned against a wall by a frantic store owner who was shouting about theft. The teen looked terrified, shaking his head in denial. A small crowd gathered, uncertain whether to intervene. Simone's instincts kicked in. She moved closer to see what was happening. Just then, a police cruiser pulled up. To Simone's chagrin, out stepped Officer Gavin Locke, alongside Officer Rodriguez. Locke moved with the same swagger, though Simone noticed a tension in his shoulders. He waded through the onlookers, barking, "All right, break it up." "What's going on here?" The store owner, a middle-aged man with sweat pouring down his brow, pointed at the teen. He tried to steal a candy bar, officer. He was loitering outside, then came in and pocketed it. The teen stammered, "I swear I was just looking at it. I didn't take anything." His eyes darted around, desperate for someone to believe him. Locke glared at him. "Turn out your pockets, kid." At that moment, Simone gently stepped forward. Locke noticed her immediately and stiffened. "Judge Holliday," he said with forced politeness, "this is a police matter." Simone kept her voice measured. "I understand, Officer Locke, but I saw the last few moments, and this crowd seems uncertain about what happened. Maybe it's a misunderstanding." Locke's expression hardened. "We'll figure that out. Please step aside." Rather than escalate, Simone complied with a nod, though she didn't walk away entirely. She maintained a discreet distance, wanting to ensure the situation didn't get out of hand. Locke turned back to the teenager. "Now, kid, empty your pockets." With trembling hands, the teen did so, revealing a few coins, a crumpled bus pass, and no candy bar. The store owner's face twisted in confusion. He must have dropped it somewhere. I'm sure he, Rodriguez, who had been scanning the vicinity, interjected gently. "Sir, it could be a mistake. Maybe you saw him holding it and assumed he pocketed it." Locke examined the teen's pockets more carefully, even patting down the sides of his hoodie. Nothing. The crowd whispered, uncertain whether to cast blame or offer apology. For a brief moment, Locke's face flickered with something akin to embarrassment. Another possible wrongful accusation. Another scene with a young black male. And Judge Holliday was standing right there, watching it unfold. Simone could see the conflict in his eyes, pride battling reality. He took a step back, exhaling slowly. "All right, let's not jump to conclusions," he said, trying to salvage authority. "Kid, what's your name?" "Eric came," the trembling reply. "Eric, do you have any friends around here? Any reason you'd be loitering outside?" Eric swallowed hard. "Just waiting for my friend. We were supposed to hang out after school." Locke stared at him for a long moment, searching for signs of deceit. But the boy's eyes were wide, raw with fear. No candy bar materialized, no hidden pockets, no evidence of theft. The store owner awkwardly apologized, saying he must have made a mistake. As the tension diffused, Simone quietly moved forward. She didn't want to undermine Locke in public, but she felt compelled to say something. "Eric, if there's nothing more, I think you should head home," she said softly. Locke gave a stiff nod. "Yes, that's all. Just be careful next time." The teen hurried away, casting one grateful glance at Simone, before disappearing down the street. The store owner retreated into his shop, muttering about the confusion. The small crowd dispersed, leaving Locke Rodriguez and Simone in a tense silence. Officer Rodriguez gave Simone a polite nod. "Good evening, Your Honor," she said, before moving to the cruiser, giving Locke and Simone a moment alone. Locke rubbed the back of his neck, not meeting Simone's gaze. A swirl of complicated emotions played across his features: anger, guilt, pride, and perhaps a flicker of remorse. Simone broke the silence. "That was a tough situation, but you handled it better than it could have gone." He glanced up, startled by the mildly positive note. "I was just doing my job." She nodded. "I know. But it's easy for these moments to go wrong. Thank you for staying level-headed this time." Locke let out a resigned breath. He looked at Simone, finally allowing himself to see her not just as a judge or an adversary, but as a person. "You think I overreacted in court the other day? Don't you?" Simone chose her words carefully. "I think we're all capable of errors, Officer Locke. The key is acknowledging them when they occur." He shook his head, posture stiffening again. "I'm not perfect, but I'm not a bad cop. I trust my instincts maybe too much sometimes, but I'm trying to protect people. It's not an easy job." "I understand," that Simone responded softly. "And it's not an easy job presiding over cases either. We all carry biases. It's our responsibility to be aware of them. That's how real justice happens." They stood there, an unspoken truce forming in the waning sunlight. Yet Simone could sense the tension beneath Locke's exterior. He was far from convinced, still wrestling with his own doubts. But for a fleeting second, they shared a mutual understanding that the justice system was flawed, that each of them was just one cog in a vast, imperfect machine. And somewhere in the swirling city, beyond Anthony Gaines was preparing to fight a battle for his freedom. The stakes were about to skyrocket, dragging Simone and Locke deeper into a conflict that would not only test their professional integrity, but also their very sense of self. The following week, Simone found herself buried under mounds of paperwork. Motions for summary, judgment, pre-trial motions appeals. Her desk was a sea of legal documents. Yet despite the workload, her mind kept drifting to Anthony Gaines. The deadline for the prosecution to provide substantial evidence was looming. Simone wondered if they would come up with anything, or if the case would be dismissed outright. At the same time, she couldn't shake the image of Officer Locke's uneasy face. In that brief moment in Harlem, she'd glimpsed a man torn between his convictions and the unsettling possibility that he'd profiled someone unjustly. Meanwhile, across town, Locke was wrestling with the ghosts of his decisions. He had tried to track down better evidence linking Anthony Gaines to the alleged theft, but the store's security footage remained inconclusive. The manager's statement was shaky, admitting she didn't see Anthony's face clearly. The more Locke dug, the more he feared the case was built on sand. His frustrations spilled over one evening when he met up with an old friend, Detective Ronald Perry, for a drink. Slouched in a booth at a dimly lit bar, Locke downed half a beer in one go. "I'm telling you, Ron, I'm sure that kid was guilty. It's just that I can't prove it." Detective Perry raised an eyebrow. "Gut feeling isn't enough, Gavin. You know that. If the evidence isn't there, the DA can't make it stick." Locke scowled. "Then what, I just accept that some punk walked free?" Perry shrugged. "Maybe you got it wrong. It happens to all of us. The question is, can you own it?" That question churned in Locke's mind long after he left the bar. Could he own it? Could he accept the possibility of being wrong? A week later, the hearing date arrived for the prosecution's progress report. Simone took the bench, scanning the courtroom. She saw Anthony Gaines seated beside Rita Flores, their expressions cautious but hopeful. On the prosecution side stood Kelly Carter, flipping through a thin file. Locke was present too, though relegated to the gallery. Simone called the proceedings to order. Ms. Carter, has the district attorney's office uncovered new evidence to establish probable cause? The prosecutor sighed. Your Honor, we have the store manager's testimony, but upon further review, we found that the security footage is inconclusive at best. In fact, the timestamps do not match the period the defendant was in the area. We have been unable to secure any eyewitnesses who can positively identify Mr. Gaines. Rita Flores raised her eyebrows in relief, then addressed the court. Your Honor, in light of these findings, we ask for an immediate dismissal. My client has already suffered the repercussions of an unjust arrest. Simone's gaze swept over the courtroom. She noticed Locke shifting uneasily in his seat. The corner of his mouth twitched, his eyes dark with conflict. Carter continued. While the evidence is not sufficient, at this time, we do not concede the possibility that Simone raised a hand. Ms. Carter. Speculation is not a substitute for evidence. At this stage, there is no probable cause. The charges against Mr. Gaines are dismissed. Mr. Gaines, you are free to go. A small wave of applause rippled through the gallery hostily from Anthony's friends or supporters. Anthony exhaled sharply, tears of relief welling up. Simone gave a measured nod. I hope you can put this experience behind you, Mr. Gaines. Anthony, choking up, replied, Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Locke remained seated, hands clenched into fists. To him, that was the final blow, public confirmation that in the eyes of the court, he was wrong. As the courtroom emptied, Simone stepped down from the bench. She noticed Locke linger for a moment, as though gathering courage to speak. She paused, giving him an opening. He looked up, lips parted, but no words came out. Finally, he just offered a slight nod. Whether it was an admission of fault or a forced courtesy, Simone couldn't tell. She gave him a courteous dip of her head and continued on her way. Outside the courtroom, Anthony found himself surrounded by a few friends congratulating him. A local journalist, Tamara Burns, approached him for a quick statement. Anthony hesitated. He wasn't eager to be in the spotlight, but he wanted people to know the importance of standing up against false accusations. This could happen to anyone, he told her. I just hope my story helps people see we have a long way to go in fixing the system. Tamara scribbled notes, already smelling a bigger story. She glanced at Simone's departing figure. A young black federal judge presiding over a wrongful arrest case. There might be a deeper narrative here. Over the next few weeks, Tamara Burns delved into the story. She interviewed Anthony Flores, the store manager, and even tried to reach out to Officer Locke. Her story, published in a local newspaper and amplified on social media, highlighted lingering racial biases in law enforcement. Though she refrained from personally attacking Locke, she mentioned his name and emphasized that the arrest had been dismissed for lack of evidence. In the swirl of reactions, some lauded Simone as a fair, courageous judge. Others criticized her, labeling her as part of the so-called liberal elite, letting criminals off the hook. Officer Locke found himself thrust into an uncomfortable spotlight. Some corners of the internet branded him a poster child for racial profiling, while others rallied to his defense, claiming he was just doing his job. At the precinct, the atmosphere grew tense. Locke's superiors, mindful of public perception, had a sit-down with him. He was reminded to follow procedure meticulously, to ensure body camera footage was always available, and to engage in impartial policing. One day, while Locke was reviewing body cam footage from his recent patrols, Officer Rodriguez approached him. "There's a mandatory training on bias reduction next month," she informed him. "The department wants us all to attend." Locke rolled his eyes. "I get it. But do you really think some workshop is going to change anything?" Rodriguez shrugged. "It might help. There's no harm in trying to see things from another perspective." Locke slammed his laptop shut. "I've had enough of these perspectives. I did my job." The judge decided how she decided. Rodriguez saw the storm brewing behind his eyes. "If this is about Judge Holliday, maybe you should talk to someone. Holding on to anger won't help you move on." He didn't respond. Instead, he left the room, tension radiating off him in waves. Meanwhile, Simone found herself fielding calls from community organizations. They praised her balanced approach and wanted her endorsement. Some even requested she speak at public forums about criminal justice reform. She was cautious, knowing the judiciary had to remain impartial. While she believed in justice, she also understood the delicate tightrope judges walked between public engagement and neutrality. In one particularly heated conversation, a local activist tried to pull Simone into a broader campaign against the police department. "We want you to be our figurehead," the activist said over the phone. "You have the credibility, and your actions in dismissing that wrongful arrest prove you stand with us." Simone sighed. "I appreciate the sentiment, but I can't become a spokesperson for any specific movement. My role is to interpret the law fairly for everyone, not to publicly pick sides." "Isn't justice a side?" the activist countered. Simone paused, choosing her words. "Justice is universal," she said softly. "I'm committed to it. That doesn't mean I can be your figurehead." Even as she hung up, Simone felt the tension gnaw at her. She understood the frustration. Too many people had been wronged by biased policing. Yet if she appeared to take a public stance, she risked undermining her capacity to fairly adjudicate future cases. One late night, Simone sat at her desk in her small home library. It was past midnight, and she had law books, open pages half read. Her mind wandered, remembering her own experiences of being pulled over or questioned when she was younger. Memories of humiliations that left lasting impressions. She thought about how improbable it seemed that a woman like her would become a federal judge in her early 30s. She had always believed in the system, even when it disappointed her. That belief was part of what drove her to become a catalyst for change from within. She also remembered the fleeting moment when she confronted Locke outside the courtroom. She sensed a flicker of conscience in him. Part of her wanted to believe he was redeemable, a man who might learn from his mistakes. But the cynic in her knew how rarely people changed. For Locke, the internal battle only grew worse. He tried to drown his doubts in after-work drinks or bury them under piles of new cases. But every time he saw a young black man in a hoodie, he felt a pang of guilt and confusion. He was haunted by the possibility that he had become exactly what so many activists protested against. His superiors noticed a change in him, too. Locke's usual confidence cracked, replaced by mood swings and irritability. One day, he nearly lost his temper during a routine traffic stop. The driver, an elderly black woman, trembled at his anger. His partner had to step in to defuse the situation. After that, the captain insisted Locke take a brief leave. "You're wound too tight," the captain told him. "Clear your head." Locke relented. He wasn't sure how to clear his head, but he took the time off, determined to find some resolution. He decided to do the unthinkable for a man as proud as he was. He booked an appointment with the department's counselor. The department counselor, Dr. Eloise Martin, had a gentle but firm demeanor. She greeted Locke in a small, warmly lit office. A potted plant thrived in the corner, and a painting of a serene lake hung on the wall. Locke sat stiffly in a chair, arms crossed. "I'm only here because the captain insisted," he muttered. Dr. Martin smiled. "That's fine, sometimes it helps just to talk." He spent the first few minutes deflecting, talking about job stress, high expectations, the pressures of city life. But Dr. Martin's pointed questions guided him toward deeper truths. Eventually, the subject of the dismissed case and Judge Holliday surfaced. I can't stand how she looked at me." "Me," Locke admitted, voice cracking slightly. "Like I was this racist cop, like I was the enemy." Dr. Martin tilted her head. "Were you worried about how she saw you, or were you worried about how you see yourself?" Locke felt as if she'd thrown cold water on him. He leaned forward, burying his face in his hands. A swirl of memories he'd tried to suppress floated to the surface the day he joined the force, wide-eyed and idealistic. The first time he witnessed an older officer use excessive force on a suspect. The times he heard racial slurs tossed around casually in the locker room. He'd always brushed those aside, telling himself he was different. But was he? "I'm not a bad person," he whispered almost to himself. "I thought I was saving the world one arrest at a time. People can do harm without being bad people," Dr. Martin said gently. "Bias and pride can blind us. It doesn't mean you can't change." The session ended with Locke feeling both raw and strangely relieved. He knew he wasn't fixed far from it, but a door had cracked open. As Locke grappled with his identity, Simone faced new challenges on the bench. A high-profile civil rights case landed on her desk, involving allegations of excessive force by the police. The plaintiffs were a family, claiming their son had been beaten during a routine traffic stop. Simone recognized the potential media circus, especially given the recent publicity around her. But she handled the pre-trial motions with her usual calm, determined to remain impartial. Then came an unexpected twist. Officer Locke's name surfaced in the discovery documents. He hadn't been the primary officer involved, but he'd arrived at the scene as backup. His body cam footage was part of the evidence. Simone read the transcripts carefully. Locke's remarks in the footage were more cautious than those of the lead officer, who was charged with brutality. Still, Locke was there, his presence, a silent thread tying him to yet another controversial incident. One evening alone in her office, Simone watched the body cam footage. The lead officer was aggressive, shouting at the driver. Locke appeared on screen, standing behind him. At one point, the lead officer shoved the driver, who fell to the ground. Locke's voice was heard saying, "Hey, that's enough." But the altercation escalated regardless. The scene ended with the driver handcuffed, face bloodied. Simone paused the footage, heart pounding. She saw Locke's face, uncertain, disturbed, yet he hadn't physically intervened. Was that fear complicity, or something else? The next day, Simone ordered a hearing to discuss the relevance of the footage. Both sides would argue its admissibility. Word traveled fast. The press was already labeling it another potential scandal. On the morning of the hearing, the courtroom was packed with journalists, activists, and members of the public. Simone walked in black robe, swaying gavel in hand. She noticed Officer Locke seated in the gallery, flanked by his attorney. Their eyes met briefly. Hers were calm but probing. His were clouded with turmoil. When the hearing began, the plaintiff's lawyer contended that Locke's footage was crucial to show the entire timeline of events. The city's defense argued that Locke's perspective wasn't central, since he didn't use force. Simone listened intently to both sides, At one point, she reviewed the footage again in open court. Gasps rippled through the audience when they saw the brutal takedown. The camera jostled, capturing the disoriented angle of the scene. And in a background audio snippet, Locke's voice. "Hey, that's enough." After the video ended, Simone folded her hands. "Officer Locke, please approach." The defense attorney stood up. "Your Honor." With all due respect, Officer Locke isn't a named defendant. Any direct questioning should occur under proper testimony procedures. Simone nodded. "I understand. However, since Officer Locke's footage is central to this motion, I want to clarify a few points. Officer Locke, are you willing to make a statement regarding this incident?" Locke glanced at his attorney, who nodded approval. Heart pounding, he walked to the podium facing Simone. The entire courtroom leaned in the tension thick. "Yes, Your Honor," he managed, voice steady, despite the adrenaline surging through him. Simone regarded him with a measured gaze. "In the footage we hear you say, 'That's enough.' Did you witness excessive force being applied by the lead officer?" Locke swallowed. He knew whatever he said could have far-reaching consequences for his colleague, for the lawsuit for himself. "I saw that the suspect was already on the ground, and I believed continuing to use force was unnecessary." "Did you intervene?" Simone asked softly, though her tone was unwavering. Locke's jaw tensed. "I told him to stop, Your Honor." Simone let a moment of silence pass. Is telling him to stop the same as physically or formally intervening? His cheeks flushed. "No, Your Honor. It's not." The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Simone's voice remained neutral. "You may step down. I will consider the footage admissible for context." "Thank you." Locke walked back to his seat, feeling like he'd just bared his soul in public. He was ashamed that he hadn't done more, that fear of reprisal from his colleague or the system had kept him from taking a stronger stand. Unbeknownst to Locke, Simone wasn't judging him as harshly as he thought. She'd seen far worse. But she also recognized that complicity came in many forms. Sometimes silence was as damning as direct action. A week later, after more proceedings and legal wrangling, Simone was set to rule on the scope of evidence allowed. As she left the courthouse one evening, she found Locke waiting by the steps. His posture was stiff, his eyes downcast. "Judge Holliday," he began. Simone paused. "Officer Locke." He hesitated, glancing around to ensure no one else was within earshot. I wanted to talk to you. Off the record, if that's allowed." She studied him carefully. "Off the record we can speak as individuals, but be mindful I can't discuss confidential details of pending cases." Locke nodded, swallowing back nerves. "I understand." They walked a short distance away from the main entrance, the evening sky casting long shadows across the plaza. People bustled by, but no one paid them much attention. Locke cleared his throat. "I know we've been on opposite sides. I never thought I'd be in this position, feeling like I owe explanations." Simone watched him, silently waiting. He forced a shaky exhale. "I came onto the force believing I'd help people, but somewhere along the line, I lost sight. I let assumptions guide me. You saw it firsthand with Anthony Gaines." She remained composed. "We all lose our way sometimes. The question is whether we find it again." He shook his head. "It's not that simple. I've seen so much crime. I've had weapons pointed at me. I've walked dark streets where one wrong move could mean I never go home. And I guess I started to assume the worst in people, especially people who looked or dressed a certain way." Simone's gaze softened. This was more honesty than she ever expected from him. Locke pressed on, voice thick with pent-up emotion. But I realize now that I can't treat entire groups like criminals just because I'm scared. Anthony Gaines might never forgive me. Heck, I might not forgive myself. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to change. The sincerity in his tone cut through her defenses. She measured her words carefully. Officer Locke, you're not the first officer to struggle with these issues, and you won't be the last. Real change takes effort. It means confronting your biases every single day. It means standing up when you see a colleague cross a line. It means remembering that the people you serve are individuals, not stereotypes. He nodded, eyes glistening. I know. I'm going to counseling. I'm trying to do better. For a moment, the tension between them lifted, replaced by a quiet understanding. Neither was a saint, neither wholly a villain. They were two people trying to uphold justice in a deeply flawed world. Locke shuffled his feet awkwardly. Anyway, I won't take more of your time. I just needed to say that. Simone offered a faint smile. I appreciate your candor. With a final nod, Officer Gavin Locke turned and walked away, his silhouette fading into the bustling Manhattan streets. Simone remained on the courthouse steps, a swirl of emotions cascading through her. She wondered if true accountability could be found in such personal revelations, or if the system's inertia was too heavy for individual changes to make a difference. The civil rights lawsuit proceeded at a steady pace, and the city eventually settled with the plaintiff's family for a hefty sum. Locke wasn't the main focus of the suit, but the lead officer faced disciplinary action. Locke's partial attempt to intervene, however minimal at least, spared him from more severe internal penalties. Still, the settlement sparked public debate. Some media outlets latched on to Simone Holliday's name again, casting her as a reformist judge. Others attacked her, claiming she was biased against law enforcement. The noise grew louder, but Simone stayed her course, deciding cases by the law and her conscience. One day, Simone received an envelope at her chambers, sealed and unmarked. Inside was a handwritten letter from Anthony Gaines. She opened it carefully, heart pounding with curiosity. In neat script, Anthony wrote that he'd begun volunteering with a community legal aid program. He credited Simone's dismissal of his wrongful arrest as the catalyst for his newfound passion for justice. He wanted to learn how to prevent others from enduring what he had. You believed me when others didn't, the letter read. You showed me that not everyone in the system is out to crush us. Now I want to give back to be part of the solution. Thank you. Simone felt tears prick her eyes. She placed the letter in her desk drawer, feeling an overwhelming sense of humility and resolve. If even one life changed for the better, that was enough to keep her going. Meanwhile, Gavin Locke received his own piece of mail, an internal memorandum from the precinct. He'd been officially cleared of wrongdoing in the brutality incident, but the higher-ups recommended he remain on desk duty for another month, continue counseling, and complete the bias training. Some fellow officers murmured that he'd gone soft. Others admired his courage to reflect on his actions. For Locke, it was an isolating time, but he clung to one hope: maybe the steps he was taking would make him a better cop, a better person. Months passed. Life in New York City raged on with its usual intensity. Sirens, skyscrapers, and endless stories of struggle and triumph. Simone handled an ever-growing docket, from corporate disputes to immigration cases. Occasionally she thought of Officer Locke, wondering whether his moment of introspection had led to lasting change. She got her answer in an unexpected way. One afternoon, an emergency hearing popped up on her schedule. A young black man was suing the city for wrongful arrest, claiming he was detained on suspicion of drug possession, despite no concrete evidence. The hearing was last minute because the plaintiff's attorney alleged immediate harm if the charges continued. Simone didn't recognize the plaintiff or the officers involved. But when the hearing began, she spotted Gavin Locke in uniform, sitting beside two other officers. He was there as a witness for the defense. The plaintiff's lawyer, Ms. Andrea Bird, argued passionately that her client was only searched because of his race. She cited how the arrest report lacked specific details and the body cam footage was missing crucial segments. When it was time for Locke to testify, Simone watched him approach the stand. He looked calmer, more measured than before. He took the oath, glancing at Simone with a determined expression. Officer Locke, Ms. Bird, began, "You were present during the arrest of my client. Did you see him engage in any suspicious behavior prior to the search?" Locke cleared his throat. "No, ma'am. I arrived as backup, as my partner said he smelled marijuana, but I personally did not observe any direct evidence of drug possession. And when your partner searched my client, did you see any drugs recovered?" Locke met Ms. Bird's eyes. "I did not. So to your knowledge, was there probable cause for the arrest?" Locke hesitated. He glanced at Simone. There was a moment of tension so thick it felt like the entire courtroom held its breath. Then he spoke clearly and firmly. "I didn't see probable cause." "No." A murmur rippled through the audience. Some eyebrows shot up among the lawyers. Ms. Bird nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, Officer Locke. No further questions." Simone felt a surge of cautious optimism. Locke was telling the truth under oath, even if it meant contradicting a fellow officer. That was significant. On cross-examination, the city's attorney tried to cast doubt on Locke's perspective, suggesting he only arrived mid-incident. But Locke held firm. "I can't provide false testimony," he said. "I only saw what I saw." After the hearing, Simone ruled in favor of continuing the case, citing Locke's testimony as a key factor. The plaintiff would have his day in court. The city's defense team looked displeased, but Simone was unmoved. As the courtroom emptied, Simone caught Locke in a quiet moment by the side aisle. She approached him, her expression calm yet warm. "That took courage," she said softly. He shrugged, though a flicker of pride lit his eyes. "Just doing what's right." They didn't say more, but the exchange spoke volumes. 6 months later, life had settled into a new rhythm. Simone continued her judicial responsibilities, earning a reputation for fairness and empathy. Anthony Gaines was flourishing at the Legal Aid Center, even considering law school. And Gavin Locke. He underwent a transformation that few had predicted. He transferred out of his old precinct, partly to distance himself from colleagues who resisted reform, partly to seek a fresh start. In his new assignment, he collaborated with community outreach programs, forging relationships with youth centers and local churches. The desk duty ended, and he was back on patrol. But this time, he approached each call with a newfound sense of caution and compassion. One warm summer evening, Locke was patrolling a quieter neighborhood when he spotted a familiar face, Anthony Gaines, wearing a neat button-down shirt and slacks, locking up the door of a local community center. It had been a long time since their court confrontation, but Locke recognized him immediately. A twinge of guilt coiled in his stomach. He considered driving on, avoiding the awkwardness, but something compelled him to stop. He parked and approached Anthony, who stiffened when he saw the uniform. "Evening, Locke," said voice, tentative. Anthony eyed him clearly, unsure how to react. "Officer Locke." Locke took a small breath, breath, removed his cap, and held it at his side, a silent gesture of respect. I wanted to say I'm sorry. What happened to you never should have happened. And I'm different now. Or at least I'm trying to be. Anthony studied him, searching for sincerity. After a weighty pause, he extended his hand. Then I'm good, he said, voice quiet but firm. We can't change the past, but we can move forward. Their handshake was brief, yet it signaled a profound moment of healing, two men on opposite ends of a deeply flawed system, acknowledging each other as human beings. Weeks after that encounter, Simone Holliday received a phone call from a community organizer who told her the story of Anthony and Locke's reconciliation. Simone felt tears sting her eyes again, that same sense of humility returning. Sometimes the seeds of justice she tried to plant did sprout in unexpected ways. And yet, for all the personal growth and pockets of redemption, the broader system remained rife with challenges. Simone continued to see cases of unjust arrests, excessive force, and prosecutorial misconduct. Locke still faced skepticism within his new precinct, and from civilians wary of any uniform. Anthony would likely carry some scars from his ordeal. But in the midst of these ongoing battles, a light of possibility flickered. Individuals could change. Hearts could soften. The arcs of people's lives could twist and turn, allowing for second chances. Locke once laughed at Simone in a courtroom. He mocked her authority because he couldn't fathom a black woman holding such power. Karma, in the end, proved far more instructive than humiliating. He was forced to confront his own demons, his own biases, and his own capacity for transformation. In the grand tapestry of justice, that single strand of redemption might seem small. But to those involved, to Simone Anthony, and even Locke, it was everything. It was proof that the system could at times produce not only punishment, but also growth, not only retribution, but also reconciliation. Officer Gavin Locke no longer laughed at Judge Simone Holliday. Instead, he respected her. And he respected the law in a way he never had before, as a shield for the vulnerable, not a sword for the powerful. That, in its own quiet way, was the hardest and most fitting karma of all. Stories like this remind us that change often starts with a single moment of awareness. Officer Gavin Locke's laughter was rooted in ignorance, but it opened a door that forced him to confront his biases head-on. Judge Simone Holliday's integrity, grace, and determination acted as a catalyst for truth, revealing that real justice demands empathy and courage. Their journey wasn't without turmoil. Both faced public scrutiny, personal guilt, and the weight of systemic flaws. Yet in this collision of pride and principle, each discovered a path toward redemption. If this story resonates with you, share it with those who believe in the power of second chances and fair trials. Spread this message of empathy and responsibility. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more stories that illuminate the trials and triumphs of real people seeking justice. Let's stand together in pursuit of a world where respect conquers prejudice,